Welcome to Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect with each other and tap into various resources in health and finance and careers. More importantly, this show is all about athletes transition out of sport. It's such a major issue today between mental health and financial literacy, and we really want to make a difference. So we interview former college and professional athletes. We talk about their journey and transition out of sport ultimately into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. And it's all about teaching aspiring athletes that there is, in fact, life after sports. So excited today to have Luke Melms. How you doing, Luke?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Rob.
It's a pleasure. So Luke was a former baseball player, played at Carroll University. And when his career was over, he got into finance and went through some different companies. Goldman Sachs, one of them, and then ultimately started his own firm. And he is the managing director of Firm Foundation Family Wealth. And then he also, and we're going to talk about this, he also is an author of a book, which will be coming out soon called Go for More. Luke, everybody talks about writing books and you got to do one. And I know someday I might do one. My son's a writer. So I'll have him as my ghostwriter. So we'll talk a little about that more later. So let's talk about growing up playing sports. How did that shape you leading up into college?
Yeah, I definitely come from an athlete family, two younger brothers. All of us played college sports. Our dad actually ran at Marquette University cross country and track and actually went on to run post-college, won a marathon. So sports, I would say, was very much a part of our life and probably from the outside was our life in a lot of ways. So I think the thing that sports does such a great job of is being able to take things that, other people maybe are taught theory in classrooms, but sports, you can't, you can prepare for certain circumstances, but what happens on the court or on the field, that happens live and you have to react to it, instantaneously. You have to process the game afterwards for better, for worse. And so I think sports is just, it teaches so much about the reality of life. Life isn't always going to be fair. Life isn't always going to go the way that you want it to go. But if you're going to move forward, you have to be able to accept that there's going to be things that happen in life, setbacks, just like in sports, that don't go the way that you want. And so for me, I think sports definitely was that, 6+ feet. So I had to just in my own sports journey navigate that, on paper, maybe I didn't have everything that a coach would dream of, but I had to work a lot harder maybe than other people and make up for that. I think the beauty of baseball in particular is it's not football. So that doesn't matter as much. There's guys out there playing baseball right now that I look in the eyes and they're great players. And so for me, I think baseball was an equalizer because it wasn't just, well, you need to be at least 6 feet tall and 200 pounds to be able to succeed in this sport. So I think that by itself really teaches the reality of life outside of sports, particularly in business. You have to know what your skills are and align your interests with them and really be able to create a path if you want to create success beyond the game.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll talk about that more later. The athlete skill set and all that, because you brought up a lot of good points there. It really does shape you. It's interesting. I was also like your dad. I was a cross country and track runner, not as good as your dad. I was on the fringe of varsity, but I did run high school and college. So let's did you have a dream of being a professional athlete? And was it a Major League Baseball player?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said that was not the dream. I can think my freshman year, there was a kid in our conference drafted as a junior, and he forewent his senior year to sign and start his pro career. So it wasn't like there weren't examples of that. I went to school in Wisconsin, which at the time was much different than today. There's kids literally being drafted out of the first round out of high school. Out of Wisconsin today, but back when I was playing nearly just shy of 15, a little more than 15 years ago, most kids played in the state of Wisconsin. And there's a handful of examples. So yeah, absolutely. That was the dream. Did it happen? No, but that was absolutely the dream.
Hey, we all have that dream. I always joke about it. I said, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player myself as well. but the talent wasn't quite there. So now I'm doing podcasts and then running businesses. Was Robin Yount uh, playing back when you were, or was that before your time?
He retired, I believe, in '93, so I was 5 at that point.
Okay,
But Molitor and Yount in those early '90s days when I was growing up were definitely my favorite players from
sure.
what I'm told, because I don't remember being 2, 3, 4 years old.
No, no, it's fine. We this past weekend we're big Mets fans. My son was a big David Wright guy. He just loved David Wright, and David Wright, they retired his number and put him into the Mets Hall of Fame. So kind of cool. So let's talk about once you get to college. Everybody talks about ultimately the transition out of sport. Whether you're transition because you got hurt, whether you transition because it's the end of college, or even if you're fortunate enough to make professional sports, when that's over. Were there any type of classes or workshops geared towards teaching athletes, what's next after sports when you were at school?
At that point, no, there wasn't anything in particular to help athletes specifically go from being a student athlete to purely whatever they were going to pursue vocationally. I know a lot's changed over the last 15 plus years.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the school. I mean, do you know if they do any of that today at Carroll?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't necessarily mean living in Florida now, I can't
Yeah.
say I'm the most connected person to the school. But I know the coach today is not the coach while I was there. I have somewhat of a relationship. I've seen him a few times because I do go back on occasion and have met with him on campus, but I don't know what they may be doing as it pertains to helping set their kids up for success beyond the game.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's changed. I mean, most of the time, depending on the age of the guest, it wasn't around back then. A little more so now, and I think it's so important. I mean, we talk to always bring up this in every podcast. It seems, but one of my guests played football in college, and he just said he really wishes that there would have been some type of like a workshop or like a 6-week workshop or a mandatory class, kind of helping ultimately once it's over. So let's talk about networking, connecting, and especially the importance of doing while you're still playing your sport.
Sure. I mean, as an athlete, I definitely didn't just put all the eggs in that basket. I guess, there's a difference between being a Division 1 athlete and being a Division 3 athlete in my case. So, I guess I was more realistic with the fact that in baseball there are Division 3 kids that get drafted, but I certainly took advantage of meeting with people. I started to go to school for accounting, switched my major into finance halfway through. So I was building relationships. I think that's one thing that the school does as a whole very well. I can think of a 2 credit class that I took, and every Friday it was accounting professionals in the industry. A lot of them had graduated from Carroll coming back and sharing from their experience, and it was a chance for us to learn what did that look like? I mean, ultimately for me, it helped me realize that wasn't the career path that I wanted to go in, but there was alumni events that I definitely made sure that I participated in. I was involved with just some other things, business wise that helped me. I had to make money. So while I was playing baseball during the summer, I had to make sure that I was also making money. I had expenses to pay throughout the whole school year, and I had to have money to cover that. So I definitely was working. And I think the biggest advantage that any college student has is that the bar is about as low as it can get. So the reality is most college students are going to do nothing. And so if you're a college student actually asking to connect with someone in the professional world, asking for 15 minutes of their time, wanting to, if you're curious about what someone's doing versus just immediately asking for something, the odds are someone will give it to you. I mean, if someone asked me for 15 minutes, chances are I would say yes. If there was a legitimate reason, like if someone wanted to go into finance and had interest, I'd absolutely give them time. So I think that's one of the things that I look back at and say I did a good job of, obviously with some help of the school creating a room for me to go into, but you got to walk through that door, and what you'll walk out of it with in any potential relationships, that's 100% up to you.
Yeah, I love that because I think it's so important to do that, to open up your mind. And, I've talked to so many different people. I mean, that's something that's, strength to me, networking, connecting, something we're, promoting with Alumni Direct. But basically, I think it's opening up to going, like you said, going to these different events and starting young. And you talked about just asking for just questions and things like that, because a lot of people, they might go into like, hey, how can you help me, and that's not necessarily the approach. I think if anything, like for me, I always say, how can I help you, kind of thing. And a lot of times these younger people, they think, okay, well, what do I have to offer to a Luke or to a Rob? And it might just be, you never know, maybe they can help our kids, or maybe they can do something that's introductions or whatever. You just don't know. But we definitely encourage, especially even at the high school level, like just start, you've got your friends, your teammates, you don't know who their parents are. I mean, just get to know people and be open to helping, I think is so important.
Yeah, I mean, if there is a way to create value, but I think if you are going to make an ask, I think people love talking about themselves. So instead of asking for something tangible, asking how they got to where they are today, that doesn't feel like an ask. It feels like the chance to really share. And I know for me that I haven't gotten to where I am through my career just because I plowed ahead. Asking for introductions and networking my way into jobs certainly was part of how I got to where I am. And so I don't forget that and realize that other people coming behind are trying to do the same thing. So if someone goes about it the right way, I definitely think that can happen.
So one of the things that I've noticed is that networking between athletes, I think it's important, but you don't see it as much. And I understand, I guess, when you're in school, you're on different schedules and all that. But we really encourage that, because I think it's, you have that affinity as a fellow athlete, where most athletes started playing sports when they were young, and it's the team, it's the leadership, it's the perseverance, it's everything that goes through that. Maybe talk a little about that, even once, whether it's in school, which I think is important, or when you're out of school, is networking with athletes across sports.
Sure. I mean, I think obviously it's different maybe if you're a college versus a professional athlete, but I think I would just speak to it after the fact. I mean, it doesn't really matter what it is. I think people want to, like, if you share something in common with someone, that is going to just instantly create a certain level of trust. I mean, just think about it for a second. Whatever school you went to, if you were on a vacation and you're far away from home and you see someone wearing a shirt that's the same school that you went to, there's this instantaneous now connectivity because everyone else around them is not wearing that shirt. And I don't know, maybe you do share things in common, but that's not known. So it just creates a natural, obviously shared life experience. So I think it makes it easier. It just depends on, I guess, the circumstances. But if you're an athlete and you're just trying to network, clearly it's much better to build relationships with people that already share something in common versus people that you're trying to figure out what you do share in common. That just creates trust much faster.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's I do a podcast, or not a podcast, a networking event for my podcast guests like yourself each month, and it's really cool to see. I mean, I've had Major League Baseball players, NFL, NBA players. I've had Olympic swimmers. I've had wrestlers, MMA fighters. Taekwondo. We just had, it's going this week, and to see these athletes get together and just kind of roll up their sleeves and saying, what can we do to work together to help each other with our businesses? And, to like what you just said, you have that commonality, just like you have as a college alumni, you have that commonality being an athlete, and utilize that. People want to help each other that have that like relationship.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, absolutely. That's something I would definitely agree with.
yeah, so let's talk about alumni engagement. Obviously, that's something that's important as an Alumni Direct, is bring back alumni. So, and again, this is probably the same as before when we talk about education, but back when you were in school, was there a movement to bring alumni athletes back, and not just for like the homecoming games or for, like the golf tournaments, but more so to maybe mentor and work with the current athletes?
I can't say yes to that, although we had several assistant coaches that were former players that had gone to Carroll. So I guess maybe that just naturally was embedded within the coaching staff. I can think actually it was a very full circle moment. A year ago, I was back on campus speaking to a finance class, and one of the assistant coaches, and he was an outfield coach, so that's who I was closest with. He actually was a guest speaker. Well, there was a panel of us, so there was three, and the two of us. It was this full circle moment. Obviously, at one point, he was coaching us, and I was a student athlete on campus. Now we were both alumni at the school, speaking to current students. Not necessarily bringing in tons of people, but like I said, there was multiple coaches that were former student athletes at the school.
Yeah, I think it's so important. A lot of people, I think, want to come back, and especially now, I think it's people. I guess also the other thing. Many years ago, there wasn't necessarily social media and things like that where you could interact as much with these people. But I think athletes want to come back, and I think I encourage like schools. I think some are better than others, and some it might be more specific, like you're saying, where maybe the coaches come back or coaches bring people back versus the whole athletic department in general. But I think it's something that's, and I think alumni, back to what you said before, like if you see somebody with a Carroll University shirt on, you're like, hey, what's up? How can I help you? Like, just you want to find out more about that regardless of the age, because it's just something that it's that commonality of the school. So, hopefully that's something that more schools are looking at. We've talked to some schools that do want to reengage their alumni athletes to bring it back. And again, not just for that local event, but to mentor and across all sports too. Because like for me, I was a runner, but I would go back to Delaware if they asked, and I would mentor. Like it wouldn't matter to me whether they're football players, basketball players, baseball players, or just anybody in general.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the one thing that I always bring up, and I don't know if you got to watch any of the episodes or listen to any episodes. So if you did, you'll be prepared. If not, it's not a big deal. So let's go back and imagine we're like in a time machine. What advice, if you can go back in time, would you give to freshman Luke at Carroll? 10 words or less.
10 words or less. Yeah. I would say that I would focus completely on the process above anything else.
I got that.
Meaning that I think it's easy to chase success. And I think if you chase anything, you're probably going to always have this gap where you don't feel like you're catching it. I think when you focus more on the process, you become the person that it requires to become to get to where you're trying to go. So it's obviously just a different way of looking at the same thing, but that's, I think, the perspective that I now have of all these years after the fact of stepping on a college campus as a 18-year-old, hoping for a lot of things, but not knowing how it's all going to play out.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then fast forward to senior Luke.
What would I say as a senior?
Back to your senior, being senior college. Yeah, what would you? Yeah,
I don't think I would say anything different. That 4 years that you spend on a college campus is just the preparation. The second you finish school, you're now at the starting line. So what I just shared to freshman Luke wouldn't be any different as a senior.
Okay, gotcha. Good deal. So let's talk about transition out of sports. So it's again, like we talked about, it could be from unfortunate injury. It could just be the end of your college playing days, or again, if you're fortunate to play professional sports. But talk a little about your transition out of sport, and then ultimately we'll talk a little more about like some advice that you give to others.
Yeah, well, I get into this in my book. I don't hide from my own story. It's not necessarily the most linear journey, and I think sharing what I just shared will make more sense. I'll not share the whole details because we could be here for an hour, but I'll paraphrase it very quickly. Because I was on the path as an accounting student, I was taking a lot more credits, and I did switch to finance. The long story short, the summer between my junior and my senior year, I met someone who I guess helped open my eyes up to something, and I saw something that I probably shouldn't have, which is to work in the personal finance world, you need licenses. The licenses absolutely matter. You can't work in the industry unless you have these licenses. Unlike my brother, who's a physician, like unless you go to med school, you can't become a doctor. That's not the story in my world. You could have a an English degree and go get the licenses, and then you can work in the industry. So the reason I mentioned focusing on the process more than chasing success is I decided actually to go get the licenses and stop going to school. So I learned the hard way that that was not a good idea over the course of a couple years. Went back, finished school, and I had so few credits that I was able to finish it as a part-time student that last year. And so for me, I guess that's why I'm passionate, and that's why I share, chapter 1 of the book is called Chasing the Chase for More. And so I share in chapter 1 that story in a little bit more detail, but I think that is the thing that athletes have. It's their greatest attribute. It's also their greatest weakness, which is common of many people. It doesn't really matter if they're an athlete or not, but in sports, we're wired to go for speed and intensity because training with speed and intensity allows for peak performance on the field. But when it comes to sports, or when it comes to business or building wealth, which is what I get to do professionally, helping people today, speed is not usually the fastest way to doing those things. It's usually the fastest way to destroying yourself. So I think it's so important to focus on the long game, and the steps on a day-to-day basis that compounded over a long period of time do very, very significant things.
Yeah, it's I agree, and so maybe you like boil it down to some couple words of advice to athletes, because it's I think it's some of the things you touched on at the beginning. It could be related to the sport you're in. It could be related to being Division 1 versus Division 3, and some people have they start maybe preparing early. So maybe give a couple words of advice in general to athletes as they complete their career in playing.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is you don't have to have everything figured out. I think my story is an example of that. You can screw some things up and still land very much on your feet. And I think that's one of the things that I mentioned on the front end that sports does a really good job of is, school is what it is. It's a lot of theory. And whether you're an athlete or not, when you get done with school, you get put in the real world and you get to find out how things actually work. So when it comes to, being an athlete and now transitioning into whatever you're going to do for the rest of your life, maybe you figure it out right out of the gates. I mean, sure, like my brother's a good example of that. He went to med school and then became a doctor. By the time he finished residency, he was in his early 30s. So I think anyone is going to have to accept that the journey to success is not going to be a fast one. Even if you quickly find out what it is you want to do, becoming someone who is significant in that industry is going to take time. So my advice would just be okay with that. And remember that that's actually what you did in sports. You didn't go from being, in my case, a 4-year-old playing t-ball to then a college athlete 2 years later, 4 years later. So use that same process that you actually lived out as an athlete and understand that that same process should and will play itself out in your career if you're willing to take that longer term perspective.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice there. So now let's fast forward to starting your firm and talk about your company and some of the great things that you're doing there today.
Sure. Yeah. So we're about a year and a half in. I previously worked at Goldman Sachs and launched Firm Foundation Family Wealth. So we are an investment firm that focuses on working with successful families, primarily in 4 different buckets: entrepreneurs, corporate executives, specialty physicians, and athletes. And what I've certainly learned in working with families over many years is that the more wealth that you accumulate, the more complex things are. And just like in sports, you need a full coaching staff. That is what I help clients do, is build that coaching staff. I as a certified financial planner really am the tip of the spear, but help bring in the right professionals to build out their whole team if they've outgrown the professional they already have. or they don't have someone on their team. Like commonly, people don't do estate planning because no one likes to talk about dying. And so it doesn't matter what age someone is, they may not have an estate plan in place or it needs to be updated. I'm not an attorney, but I work with attorneys all the time. Now, I don't file taxes. I'm not a CPA, but I work with CPAs or bring CPAs to the table. So I really enjoy being able to help families build. The analogy that we like to use, which is tied back to the name Firm Foundation Family Wealth, is a house. So you need to have a solid foundation, which is everything in someone's financial life, which is built on. So the planning aspect really is the foundation. The four walls is the fun, whether that's investing, purchases, philanthropy, and the roof of someone's house is really managing risk, which is done through multiple different ways. That's what I love doing. My brain is just wired for numbers. So going back to what I said earlier, know what your interests are, but also know what your skills are. And for me, these two things have collided. Growing up, I played with money just for fun. My mom always said, "You're going to work at a bank one day." Clearly, not necessarily knowing that I'd one day go work at a global bank that has a lot of name recognition. But I think for me, I really enjoy working with people. That's why we work with families. I don't work with institutions. I don't want to manage wealth and report to a board of directors or anything along those lines, whether, when it pertains to pensions and endowments and all that stuff. So we focus on working with families, and that's what we stick with.
And then are you specifically in your area, or is this something that's like a national type scope? So if you got, families or athletes that you're dealing with, they're like all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of wealth concentrated here in Florida. Florida's a massive state, though. So I have clients all over and have clients out of state. Sure, Zoom is something that makes that easier, but I meet with clients no matter where they live one time every year in person, at least. This is one of the most intimate relationships that someone's going to have. So this is not just something casual that, in my opinion, should be done over Zoom. And so we meet with people in person no matter where they live.
That's great. I like that personal touch, and I like what you talk about the team and just bringing those people together. Have you kind of delved at all into the NIL space?
So, I mean, I think that's something we'll get more into possibly as time goes on. At the same time, though, I like educating college students, but I also would say that, for me to make the biggest impact, we're typically working with families that have already achieved a pretty high level of success when it comes to building wealth. So, clearly there are 7-figure contract earners out in the NIL world, but there's only so many of those. So I love working with athletes, but when I mention athletes, I think one thing that I should be clear on, I actually would argue that I enjoy working with former athletes more than current athletes. I have several clients that have been successful in the business world, have sold businesses, have been C-suite executives. I like working with people that have the same DNA as I. So that doesn't necessarily have to mean that they're a current athlete on the field, although I definitely have done that. I like working with people that have already moved on, whether it's college or pro athlete, and are focused on their next venture. And I love helping those people build the next thing, because as I like to say, even if you play 20 years as a professional athlete, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I mean, you're around 40 years old. You can't tell me that a type A person is now going to sit on their couch because they made a couple $100 million. So I personally find a lot of satisfaction helping people focus on taking the success that they're creating, but then ultimately building the financial stability and legacy that they want to, so that they have the freedom to do the stuff they want to do because they've worked very hard. The people I work with have very little free time. So I want the little time that they do have outside of creating the success in their vocation to go have fun with their family, friends, do whatever they're going to do, and let me worry about their financial life and all of what's going on behind the scenes.
All right, well, let's talk a little about the books. Author, you're got to be excited. It's coming out, and you said within the next 30 days. Talk a little about what the book's about.
Yeah, so this is a book that I would say was a year-long process to write, but is filled with a lifetime of experiences. So it's titled Go for More, The Athlete's Playbook to Create Success Beyond the Game. It's a book that I always wanted to write and finally did it. For me, what it really does is it focuses on helping athletes understand, whether they're a current or former athlete, that it's not so obvious what it takes to create success off the field. And that doesn't just necessarily mean in their career. The thing that I think about is, you really truly be winning. You can't be winning in your career, whether it's an athlete or in business, but yet have the rest of your life be on fire, whether that's with your money, with your marriage, with other relationships that are important to you. Your legacy is more than just that of an athlete. And so what this book helps athletes do is understand how to create that, so that at the end of their life, it's not, oh yeah, well, look at my accomplishments as an athlete, or even as a successful person within their career beyond sports. If you're not winning in all those areas, I would argue that you're losing. And so we call it the Athlete 360 journey. And so just like, a race has a starting line and a finish line, we want to help people be successful all the way through the finish line, which is not the end of their career as an athlete or a business person, but the end of their life. And so this book really touches on how to do that. What I did is I injected personal stories from my own journey, but also those that I've gotten to know over the years, added practical strategies and real world advice. And that's what 11 chapters of this book entails. And I'm really excited to get it out there. The foreword is written by Brendan Harris, who's become a good friend over the last decade, who's a former Major League Baseball player. So it's got a lot in there, and for anyone that gets their hands on it, I know that it's going to make a big impact.
That's great. And how do they find the book?
Yeah, it'll be available on Amazon, I think, is where most people more easily find it. But if you want to go to Barnes and Noble, that'll be available online there as well.
That's great. And is the Audible version coming out in the future?
There will be. That's something that we're going to kind of use as I guess you could call it like a second launch to the book.
Okay.
But there will be an Audible version at some point in the future.
That's great. I always joke around about that because it's like, for me, like I can't sit and read, but like it's constantly, like, whether I'm walking or running, and just being able to listen to something is great. I mean, this some really good audiobook. So how do people find you?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I would say that's an easy way to do that. Just Luke Melms. If you want to find me on Instagram, it's also at Luke Melms there as well. I don't really use Twitter or Facebook, but Instagram and LinkedIn are two places that I could easily be found if you wanted to connect personally.
Great. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com. If you go to our YouTube channel, that is where you can find the podcast Athletes, Entrepreneurs, Alumni Journey, along with across all the different networks, Spotify and Apple and all that. But each week, I talk about the nuggets of just, getting some great advice from the athletes that I have on here. And I think it's, we want to make an impact. I mean, I always say at least one, but obviously we want to impact a lot more people out there. It's a struggle. There's, with athletes transition out of sport, whatever level it might be. And we really want to help and align ourselves with various partners like Luke, and just, bringing out the best of the products and services to help people out. So, Luke, thank you again. This has been great.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Rob. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to come on here and share from my journey. And I know that everyone's running their own race, and wish everyone the best.
Absolutely. So thanks again. And it's been a pleasure.